Welcome to Regent Park TV. I'm Kedar Ahmed, and today we shine a spotlight on critical issues affecting some of the most vulnerable members of our community. On November the 28th, 2024, our reporter Fred Alvarado was on location at 163 Queen Street East in Toronto's Moss Park neighborhood to cover Voices for Change, ending gender-based violence among refugees and newcomers. Hosted by Hope for Refugees International, this event was part of the global 16 Days of Activism Against Gender-Based Violence campaign. The gathering brought together refugees, newcomers, LGBTQ asylum seekers, and advocates to confront the harsh realities of the gender-based violence. Survivor stories were at the heart of the event, offering powerful accounts of resilience and hope. Keynotes by Honourable Charmaine A. and MPP Dr. Jill Andrews stressed the need for inclusive policies and support. This event is a vital step in addressing gender-based violence in neighborhoods like Moss Park and the Downtown East, where vulnerable communities, including refugees, newcomers, and LGBTQ individuals, face unique challenges and urgent needs for support and advocacy. In the following video, we feature an exclusive interview with Patrick King Moisigi, Program Manager, Hope for Refugees International, where he shares his insights on the ongoing fight against gender-based violence. Patrick highlights the urgent need for increased funding to support these critical initiatives and stresses the importance of events like this one in raising awareness and creating meaningful change within refugees and newcomer communities. After Patrick's interview, we'll bring you key segments from the event. Stay tuned.
Hi, my name is Patrick Moisigi King, and I'm the founder and the program manager of Hope for Refugees International. And today we're here for the Voices for Change, ending gender-based violence among refugees and newcomers event. And this is actually the first of its kind event here in Canada, where a refugee-led, survivor-led, LGBTQ grassroots-led organization is doing a gender-based violence event that is bringing together newcomers, activists, policymakers, frontline workers, advocates for gender-based violence. Like you're aware, we are currently commemorating the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence, and this is a very important momentum where we get to rally everybody to take action to end gender-based violence, because gender-based violence is by far the most inhumane human rights violation that affects women and girls globally. It's a global pandemic, and it is not only a women's issue. It affects communities, it affects families, it affects children, it affects men. It has mental health, far away mental health effects, well-being related effects, as a result of, gender-based violence. Girls drop out of school, women are raped, there's physical violence, there's all sorts of, including harmful practices like female genital mutilation and others. So we're here to really rally up the community, but also raise and amplify the voices of newcomers, especially those from Africa who are also refugees and asylum seekers who are here, who are at the periphery and or who are at the high risk of either experiencing violence or who are survivors. And we know that there's very many systemic barriers here that affect refugees and increase their vulnerability to gender-based violence. So, for example, housing insecurity is a huge problem. Income insecurity, unemployment, because we know that very many refugees and newcomers struggle to find work, and especially meaningful work, and as a result they're exploited. Some struggle to find housing, and as a result they're exploited, and also some, because of financial limitations and insecurities, they are unable to leave households where their perpetrators stay, so they have to stay longer with perpetrators because of income inequality and all that. And also they struggle to find support and services. They don't know, some of them lack information about their legal rights and human rights, and some as well struggle because of language barriers. So all those put them at a higher risk of gender-based violence. So we want to raise awareness. We want to call on policymakers to make sure that services are survivor-centered, and that GBV services also respond directly to the unique needs of survivors, and especially the refugees and newcomers. The City of Toronto last year declared gender-based violence an epidemic, actually gender-based violence and intimate partner violence. And we know that gender-based violence and intimate partner violence is more common or prevalent among racialized Black women and or families or communities, and also other racialized communities as well. But we know that it is very common among Black communities. And of course, refugees, although we do not have sufficient data, but as Hope for Refugees, we have witnessed these cases because our members report these cases to us. There's like, because of, many of our members stay in shelters. They even struggle to find shelters. So homelessness alone increases their risk to gender-based violence. So the cases are really high, and when we talk about gender-based violence, we talk about all different forms of violence, including sexual exploitation, harassment, economic abuse, and all those other different forms of violence, including even physical abuse, and also mental health, trauma, and mental kind of like challenges and struggles and all that. So this is really common among refugees, and especially Black African refugees, because they are the ones who struggle to even find a shelter. They're the ones who are struggling to find a job. They face racism, they face discrimination, and especially also LGBTQ refugees and newcomers. Yes. We have several service provision agencies that are represented here, like Victim Service Toronto Rape Crisis Center, Uplift Black, and several others. And these are services that are doing really, really amazing work in supporting survivors, with like mental health services, with legal support, with housing, and several others. So we wanted to call them in because we want the refugees and the newcomers to know about these service providers and to get to understand their services and reach out, right, to support, because you can only be supported when you reach out. And we also want to, break the stigma around speaking out and reaching out, because we know that very many survivors opt to keep quiet, and we know that silence is deadly. So this event is really to help survivors to know that there is support out there. They can step out. They can know that they can call Victim Service Toronto and they will be supported. They can call Toronto Rape Crisis Center. They can call, the minister was here from the Ontario government, and she was speaking about existing services and funding opportunities. And as a grassroots organization, we want to call for more funding, because we cannot continue doing this work without funding. And we know that it is very important, essential work that needs to continue to be done. And in terms of key highlights, of course, it's coming out loudly that, systemic barriers like, housing insecurities, income inequality, and unemployment and all that are some of the major barriers that are exposing newcomers to and refugees to violence, and these are the issues that need to be addressed.
Lastly, is there anything else you'd like to add in terms of what are some of the solutions that you're expecting? Is the city doing enough, to tackle this epidemic?
We've seen the mayor really at the forefront of this, and also as a survivor, she has really been at the forefront of speaking out for survivors. But we need to see funding, right? We need a strategy, a City of Toronto strategy for addressing gender-based violence and intimate partner violence, and we need all different sectors to be consulted. We need refugees and newcomers, and Hope for Refugees for sure is more than happy to support, consultations with newcomers so that we can have concrete recommendations. We need employment. We need refugees to be able to find jobs and employment opportunities so they are not exploited. We need them to find housing. We need more shelter space, right? We don't need, the more we get women unhoused, the more we get women trans people and non-binary people on the streets without housing, without shelters, the higher the chances of them being exploited by the bad guys, right? We need more mental health support, counseling, and all forms of mental health support for very many newcomers that are suffering from isolation and other things in the shelters, right? Because some of them also come here when they have experienced violence from back home, right? Including domestic abuse, including, even other heinous forms of violence like sexual abuse. Some are running away from wars in Congo, in Cameroon, in Ethiopia and other places, and they need to be supported. They've been raped. There's been, we work with very many members who have faced female genital mutilation, child marriages, sexual abuse, and all those other forms. So they need to be supported. We need to see all these things embedded in a city strategy to address gender-based violence. And of course, as Hope for Refugees, we also want to come up with a strategy of addressing gender-based violence among refugees and newcomers. And so we'll be reaching out to many community organizations to consult them. Of course, we don't have funding for this yet, but we're doing mobilization of resources. Yeah, so we want to see the city invest more money, because declaring intimate partner violence an epidemic is one thing, very, very important step, and we also want to call on the provincial government to do that, because we know recently there were efforts to declare intimate partner violence and gender-based violence an epidemic in Ontario, but it didn't pass Parliament. So we want to see really the government, Premier Doug Ford and all the MPPs come take action to support survivors, because about 65 women are dying of femicides, right? That is already a huge number. We don't need to see 100 women die to know that this is an epidemic. No, 65 women dying because of intimate partner violence in Toronto here is huge. And hundreds of thousands also facing sexual exploitation and all other forms of abuse, economic abuse and others is a lot. So we need to see more funding, and especially going to grassroots organizations. Thank you.
I'm just going to kind of be introducing our speakers today, and happily to recognize the vendors and everybody who is here today. So we have Victim Services Toronto, the Toronto Rape Crisis Center here, the Canadian Center for Victims of Torture. We also have the Workers Action Center, and my organization, Uplift Black. So yeah, we're here for answer any of your questions during the breaks. But we ask that you, your attention to the speakers today, as these are really compelling conversations. Okay, so thank you. Okay, so we're going to have our opening remarks, and we're going to call the ED of Hope for Refugees International, Lillian Ane Babaze Tusime. Thank you.
Thank you so much, the MC. Good afternoon, everyone. It's an honor to stand before you today at this remarkable gathering, the very first of its kind in Canada, organized by a Black refugee-led grassroots organization to shine a light on the urgent issue of gender-based violence among refugees, asylum seekers, and newcomers. Let me begin by expressing my heartfelt gratitude to all of you, survivors, allies, advocates, policymakers, and community leaders who have come together to stand in solidarity with those whose lives have been affected by gender-based violence. Your presence here signifies hope, resilience, and a collective commitment to end this pervasive violation of human rights. Now, the challenges faced by Black African refugees and newcomers. The reality for many Black African refugees and newcomers in Canada is deeply challenging. While Canada is a beacon of hope for many fleeing violence, persecution, and instability, it is also a landscape filled with systematic barriers that increase their vulnerability to gender-based violence, intimate partner violence. So these are some of them. Economic insecurity. Many refugees and newcomers face unemployment or precarious work. Financial dependence often traps survivors in abusive relationships, leaving them unable to break free. Housing insecurity. Refugees often lack access to shelters and safe, affordable housing. Women fleeing violence are at even greater risk of homelessness or re-victimization. Social isolation. Without social networks, many newcomers feel alone, unable to seek help or find support. Language barriers and unfamiliarity with Canadian systems make navigating services even more difficult. Culture stigma and discrimination. Survivors of gender-based violence often face stigma within their own communities, and Black and LGBT refugees also experience racism and discrimination in broader society. Lack of accessible services. Too often, services designed to support survivors fail to meet the cultural or specific needs of Black, African, LGBT, and newcomer communities. These barriers do not just affect individuals, they awaken families, communities, and the society at large. At Hope for Refugees International, we recognize these challenges because they are our lived reality. We are the only Black refugee and LGBT-led grassroots organization in Canada addressing gender-based violence and working directly with survivors. Our work includes awareness campaigns, educating communities about the realities of GBV, including the unique risks faced by refugees and LGBT newcomers. Survivor-centered support, providing peer support, connection to essential services, and advocacy for those affected by GBV. Advocacy for systematic change, calling for policies and resources that address the root cause of GBV and provide equitable access to services for survivors. Community building, creating safe spaces for refugees and newcomers to share their stories, foster resilience, and build networks of support. But I must speak candidly. We are doing this crucial work. We are doing this crucial work without funding. This event today, historical in its scope and impact, has been made possible only through the financial contributions of a few of our dedicated volunteers and members, many of whom are refugees and newcomers themselves. Their sacrifices demonstrate the urgency of this cause and the strength of our community. But this is model and unsustainable. A call for action. The need for our work is immense and our capacity is limited. Without support, we will not be able to continue providing these vital services. Hope for Refugees must be supported by the City of Toronto, the provincial and federal governments, and the philanthropic organizations and foundations. I call upon the Minister, the MP, city representatives, funding organization, and every individual in this room to invest in this work. Support Hope for Refugees so we can expand our programs, deepen our impact, and ensure that no survivor is left behind. Together we can increase access to survivor-centered services, fund culture-responsive, trauma-informed programs that meet the unique needs of Black refugee and newcomers, address systematic barriers, work collaboratively to tackle the root causes of vulnerability, including housing, employment, and mental health support. Amplify the voices of survivors. Center the lived experiences of refugees and newcomers in policy making and advocacy policies. Today, as we gather here, during the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence, we have a unique opportunity to make history, not just by raising awareness, but by committing to tangible actions that will change lives. Hope for Refugees is here, led by and lived experience of refugees and survivors of gender-based violence, ready to do the work that is so desperately needed, but we cannot do it alone. Your support, financial, political, and community-based, will ensure that this work continues and grows. Let us live here today not just inspired, but united in our resolve to create a Canada where refugees and newcomers can live free from violence with dignity, safety, and opportunity. Thank you for your support, your solidarity, and your shared commitment to ending gender-based violence. Together, we can create a change. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Very important information. Funding is needed, and anybody who has access to that needs to step up and help, because this work is really important. So speaking of people who might have access to money, or at least some power to get it for us, we have Dr. Jill Andrew, MPP for Toronto St. Paul, as our next speaker. So Dr. Jill Andrew, PhD, is the MPP for Toronto St. Paul's. Jill serves as the Ontario NDP culture critic and women's issue critic for the official opposition. Jill also sits on the Standing Committee on Policy. Jill is the first Black queer person to be elected in the Ontario legislature and reportedly in Canada. Yoo-hoo! Since then, Jill has been a leading voice on issues of gender, race, and social justice, the housing crisis, healthcare inequities, education, and the immeasurable benefits of arts and culture to our community, but also to the physical, mental, and social. Jill was named MPP first runner-up by Now Magazine's Reader's Choice Awards, an exciting acknowledgement for a rookie MP at the time. She's also tabled a motion in the legislature calling for the adoption and full implementation of ministerial intersectional gender equity strategy, which will require proposed legislation to be reviewed through an intersectional gender lens before it becomes law, to ensure the impact of said legislation on women, gender diverse, and racialized Ontarians is comprehensively weighed, accounted for, and made public. Yeah, are you okay? Okay, we're good. Okay, you're like, okay, Jill's gonna talk more about all of what Jill's doing in the community. So come on up, Jill. Thank you.
Oh my goodness. Good afternoon, everyone, and how are you? I want to start by saying I need to be back at Queen's Park for 3 p.m. And I'm very, very sorry that our time is so limited. But we were here earlier, but I know how things go sometimes. Anyways, Bill 173. This is a bill that the official opposition NDP put forth to declare intimate partner violence an epidemic. This comes from community, it comes from experts, it comes from survivors, most importantly. It comes from those who are on the front lines, many of you in this room, helping survivors, newcomers, immigrants, citizens, folks who are born here. It does not matter. Violence does not discriminate. However, what we do know is that intimate partner violence, gender-based violence, is disproportionately happening to Black, Indigenous, racialized people of color, and to our 2S LGBTQIA+ community, of which I am a very proud member of. What this means to everyone in the audience is we have to, thank you for 2-minute warning, we have to be vigilant. We have to, each one of you needs to reach out to the MPP that is leading your area. If you don't know who it is, go to Elections Ontario, put in your postal code, and that will tell you. We need the government to hear loud and clear that Bill 173 needs to be passed and made law now. Not tomorrow, not 6 months from now, not a year from now, today. The government told us on April 10th, 2024, that they were going to support this bill. What we've been seeing since then has been politricking and politicking. Consultations in committees. People telling them what the government, this government and previous governments have known for decades, where intimate partner violence is concerned, where gender-based violence is concerned. things that I was learning about as an undergraduate at York University in 1998. The survivors have spoken. We need to declare intimate partner violence an epidemic. Why? Because that will immediately release real, sustainable, emergency support, ongoing support to the sector, a sector that is grossly underfunded. Rape crisis centers, sexual assault centers, nonprofit organizations doing the work of the government without a penny from the government. It is violence. That is systemic violence in itself. For those who are most oppressed, who are most made marginalized in their communities, to have to then do free labor and have elected officials take credit for it without them putting $1 on the table. So I say, I'm going to cut right now. Thank you, Fariba. Thank you for having me speak for a brief moment. Thank you to Hope for Refugees Foundation for the work that you all are doing. To all the incredible partners here, I appreciate you. But if I leave you with nothing else, remember, you have a voice. Do not be afraid to use it. Contact your MPPs and make sure they know that we need every single dollar, every human resource. We need every systemic tool available to a governing majority conservative government to protect the lives of women and children and marginalized communities at any cost. Thank you so much and have a great afternoon. Thank you
for being here for us. Thank you. And Jill said some important things, right? To contact your local MPP. So you go to elections.ca, put in your postal code, it'll tell you who your local MPP is, and make sure you let them know that we need to declare this a crisis that needs to be supported. Okay. And you'll realize a lot of when you're looking to do any type of advocacy or activism work, this is what you need to do. You need to be contacting the local politicians who can, get to the House of Commons, make sure that they're bringing this forward, and that's the only way that we're actual funding and support for these programs. So it's the gender-based violence organizations are severely underfunded, and so we need your support, each and one of you, to reach out to your local MPPs. All right, so our next speaker is Shirley Gillett, the I Do Project. Shirley Gillett has been working with survivors and those at risk of forced marriage since 2008. Working with the I Do Project, she assists with the repatriation of women and girls who have been taken abroad for forced marriage and helps those facing or fleeing a forced marriage in Canada. She provides training on forced marriage to service providers, government personnel, and community members, and is the coordinator of the Survivors Group, which brings together survivors of forced marriage and FGM for community outreach and mutual support. She has received the Spirit of Resilience Award from Reclaim Your Voice and is the 2019 Distinguished Women's Award from Uzima Women Relief Group International for her work on forced marriage. So welcome, Shirley. Thank you. Thank you for this work.
Thank you. It's really exciting to see so many people here committed to, ending gender-based violence and the 16 days of activism to end GBV. And anybody who is working in the field, it's 365 days of a year that we're active. And this is a very important thing for me. Going on and on. Anyway, it's very important to me. I'm a survivor of gender-based violence myself, and I've been working in this field for many years. A little bit about what the I Do Project does. We do help with the repatriation of Canadians who've been taken abroad for a forced marriage. So I liaison with Global Affairs and CBSA. I did a training for them, CBSA officers a few weeks ago, so that they can make sure that the women get off the plane safely and can meet with me. And we also have a survivors group, and our survivors come from all kinds of backgrounds. There's Christian, Muslim, Hindu, Sikh, atheist. They come from European backgrounds, South Asian backgrounds, Middle Eastern backgrounds, and the majority actually come from an African background. We have working with women who've been in Kenya, Uganda, Nigeria, Somalia. And so the purpose that we want is, if you see our little logo down there, you probably can't see that it has the I do, it has an exclamation mark after it, because we want to end forced marriage in Canada and everywhere in the world. We want to make sure that everyone says an enthusiastic I do to their marriage. And some of the things that we've done is we've created ESL curriculum. We worked with the TDSB right here in Toronto on piloting that, and it's available free of charge, a Creative Commons license on our website. We also created a program for survivors so that they could go out and facilitate workshops with me, telling their own stories, and it was learning to tell their own stories safely and in an empowering way. First, I'm going to ask, does anybody here know someone who's been in a forced marriage? Okay. All right. Well, you might. You just might not know that you do. But a forced marriage is any marriage that does not have the full and free consent of both partners in the marriage. And so that includes child marriage. Children, just by their age, they can't fully consent to a marriage. And there are all kinds of negative things that can come out of a forced marriage. But it's first important to recognize that forced marriage is a human rights violation under international law. Forced marriage is not a valid marriage in Canada. And as such, anybody who's been forced into a marriage can get that marriage annulled. Some of the things that people think about, I mean, obviously, if there's violence or threat of violence used, that's not going to be a marriage that is freely chosen. It's going to automatically be a forced marriage. But so is coercion and deceit. Some of the young women have been, taken abroad, told they're going on a vacation, only to find out that they're getting married at the destination. Emotional blackmail, and that's such as being told that, if you don't marry this guy, your little sister is going to have to marry him. Or if you don't marry this guy, your grandfather's going to have a heart attack and it will be all your fault. So consent to marry needs to be freely given. And the various circumstances under which this happens are, they're legion. And many of us know someone. It's not the same as an arranged marriage. I want to make that clear. Because in arranged marriage, as long as the person has a choice, an arranged marriage can be, a solid way of finding a good marriage partner. But when a marriage is forced, just the negative things, it intersects with so many kinds of violence. There's so much domestic violence in forced marriages. There's also going to be, especially if it's a child getting married, there's going to be great difficulties when a child gives birth under 18. It doubles the risk of infant and maternal mortality and of complications at childbirth. And when they're under 16, it's 5 times greater. So there's a lot of physical consequences. Of course, if someone's forced into a marriage, then there's going to be sexual violence, there's going to be rape. They didn't choose this marriage and they're not giving their consent to it. So, in terms of getting resources, there are resources in this city for anyone. We do a lot of referrals for legal help, legal assistance. There are agencies that do that specifically and have the knowledge about forced marriage and its illegality. We also do referrals for counseling. And I think, what you're hearing from each of the organizations is that there is not enough funding put into any of the organizations that are dealing with this. And we do need to work on that, because any of us in our individual lives probably know the prices of everything keep going up, and yet there's less and less funding for organizations. We need to get that from the government. So I wanted to ask, does anybody have any questions about forced marriage? If you do, you can come up to me, because I'm going to be hanging around for a while, and speak about it. But just in case there's something, that burning question that somebody has right now. Does anybody have a question? No? Okay. All right. Then I'll let we go on to the next speaker, and thank you very much for your time.
Much. Thank you for your work, really. Next up, we're going to have a spoken word performance by spoken word artist Jameson. Where's Jameson? There you are. Thank you. Hi, Jameson.
Hi, everyone. This piece is entitled "The Battle Between My Mind and My Hand." This hand of mine, no, my mind. Why am I always at war, raging with these entities? This hand of mine, no, my mind. I can hardly believe this is real, that this is happening. I was right. It felt good. It erupted within me, an inferno of uncertainty. My emotions danced in triumph, satisfied in the victory. There I stood. No, there I sat. A king in my own domain, the head and never the tail, the one in charge, the ruler of this house. And now I find myself in regret. This hand of mine, no, my mind, no, you asked for it. You pushed me, didn't you? It was you all along. No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't you. This hand of mine, my mind, I lost control. How did I let the gates of my deepest fear crack open? How did I let them flood into my soul like this? The boy, this little boy within me, I hid him so far away. The one I buried beneath layers of pride and false strength. He's now standing face to face with me, raw and exposed. My own self-hate, my own pity, the very things that I thought I locked away in some dark chamber are now standing tall before me. It's frightening. It's frightening, and I'm scared. My vulnerability standing face to face with me, looking at me in the mirror, eye to eye, head to head, and hand to hand. And I'm standing there at the crossroads of where I was born. This hand of mine, no, my mind. Peace I leave with you, but where is my peace now? You see, I wanted to bring peace to this place I call home, which is my mind. But how could I when my heart was divided between my heart and my mind, a war within myself? Two forces, one in harmony and the other a bit unsettled. The struggles of my self-restraint are now shattered, vanished like a storm in the clouds. This hand of mine, no, my mind. This inner person that I see standing before me is telling me that this is not meant to be, but this hand of mine and my mind, I needed to think. I needed to act right. But I see you. The inner me saying that it's okay. You will heal. You will forgive yourself. But always remember, it's not the hand. It's the mind. This hand of mine, but my mind. Thank you.
That was beautiful. Thank you so much, James. Thank you. All right. So before we introduce our next speaker, well, I'll just kind of mention it's the Honourable Charmaine A. Williams, who's the Associate Minister of Women's Social and Economic Opportunity. We would like to get a photo with some of our newcomers. So right by the Hope for Refugees, if you'd like a photo with the Associate Minister of Women's Social and Economic Opportunity, please come on over here. We're going to take that photo and then Charmaine will be speaking. Okay?
Good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, I'm Charmaine Williams. I'm Ontario's Associate Minister of Women's Social and Economic Opportunities for the province of Ontario. I am the minister of a ministry that used to have a different name. We've always had a women's ministry, but does anybody know what the name used to be? It used to be called Women's Issues. Yeah, Women's Issues. My issues are my husband's issues. Any issue that impacts women impacts, right? And so we had to change the name because we want to make systemic change in Ontario. At least that's my goal. I used to work in children's mental health almost 20 years before I became a politician. And I worked with many women who were in violent households, who were fleeing violence, who were on the journey of rebuilding their lives, who were starting their lives here in Canada in a new country. And what I often found from the women I used to work with is they would leave these relationships that are abusive if they had financial stability. It's one of the most crucial, critical driving factors of abuse that women face in Ontario. And so we have a duty right now through the Ministry of Women's Social and Economic Opportunities to help women rebuild and establish themselves. And especially as we build Ontario, our goal is to make sure, our goal is to make sure that women can see themselves working in any sector you choose, especially the trades, for example. The trades is a sector very well, and it creates stability for generations to come. So why can't women be a part of that journey? Well, what we've done through investing in programs like the Skills Development Fund, through programs that I invest in, the Investing in Women's Futures program, the Women's Economic Security program, we are seeing more women get into these sectors. Should I keep? Yeah, we're seeing more women get into these sectors. We've seen about a 35% increase in women who are becoming apprenticeships in carpentry, in do you want to turn that microphone on? Because I think maybe it's feedback. I don't know. Okay, yeah. We're seeing more women enter these sectors, which is such a good thing because we know it's going to create a future for them family. But we've also are working to make sure these sectors are safe for women. Because one thing I don't like is that when you have sectors that are heavily male dominated, I don't want to see women who are fleeing violence enter into a sector where they're further victimized. And so what we've been doing is putting into legislation things like making sure, and you might chuckle at this, but it's the reality, making sure job sites have properly fitted personal protective equipment for women to wear, right? Because some women are trying to do electrical work with gloves that are too big or coveralls that are too big. But then also making sure that job sites have washrooms for women. Those are things that we're doing. I've spoken to one woman who was working as an electrician up north, and she said she would have to park at a Tim Hortons and change in the washroom 15 minutes away from the job site in order to have a clean place to change. And I'm like, well, that doesn't work. That's an extra hurdle that women have to go through to do the job. So we're trying to make this better. But what about newcomer women coming to Ontario? One thing we've found is that many women who come to Ontario with the expectation of starting a new life, after having family invest thousands of dollars to send their women here, to come and realize the reality is not the dream that you had. And we found that a lot of immigration consultants are guilty of selling a false dream. And so we just tabled legislation yesterday to go after some of these bad actors, to make sure immigration consultants are not victimizing people who come here to Ontario. And, I do feel so appreciative for so many organizations who are doing the work here in Ontario to keep women safe. Like, I know what it's like working frontline. Like, your job, you've seen a lot, right? You've seen a lot of ups and downs. You've held women when they're at their worst. Many of you know what it's like to walk a woman through a journey to healing. And so in Ontario, I want to make sure that programs and organizations have those resources. What we did, one of the first things I did when I became a provincial politician was go to the federal provincial territories meeting and work with the federal government to sign the Gender-Based Violence National Action Plan. And all ministers across Canada, we all signed this agreement to end gender-based violence and work together to come up with a strategy. And from that strategy, the federal government released to Ontario $162 million. But from that strategy, we created a strategy here in Ontario called Ontario Stands. If you haven't read it, I encourage you to read through it. And so what we've done, because we do know, and what we notice is that there's a lot of programs who've been running without funding increases for many years. And we wanted to bring up the funding, so we used $62 million from the federal GBV NAP to raise the base funding for many organizations that are serving women in Ontario. But then we also wanted to close the gap in communities where many organizations are like, I have a great idea, I'm gonna start working on it, but it's on the side of your desk, right? And you're like, I don't know how I'm gonna find the funding for this, but we're gonna make it work because we know this program is a good one, right? Some of y'all know what I'm talking about, right? Well, what we've done is we've released through the second pillar on Ontario Stand is prevention and a call for proposals to fund new initiatives or to fund those initiatives that you've been working on that you would like us to know about to have funding for it. And so we've taken $100 million from the GBV NAP funding and are putting that out to community. And so that call for proposals closed on October 11th, and we've had overwhelming response, which is a good thing. And we're gonna go through them and be able to release those funds. But that $162 million that we've received from the GBV NAP is complementing what Ontario's investing. So we're investing $1.4 billion over the next 4 years into community programs, supports, and resources to help organizations in Ontario close the gap and make sure that we are working to keep women safe. Thank you. Thank you. Aw. I appreciate you. But also right now, we've been making significant investments in these programs. Like I said, the Women's Economic Security Program is one of them. Anybody can access those programs. In Ontario, when we combine the IWF, Investing in Women's Futures, and the Women's Economic Security Programs, we have 58 locations across Ontario. And if you go to the Women's Economic Security website, it will list out all the locations that any woman can go to. If you're working on rebuilding your life and you have barriers that get in the way of your success, the Investing in Women's Futures is really great. because it provides a lot of the wraparound supports, and so does the Women's Economic Security Program. But I find to rebuild, to get yourself started, and to get yourself connected, it provides wraparound supports. It addresses those, food security, transportation, childcare. Those programs will cover those barriers that might be preventing a woman from accessing their success in completing the program. Now, the Women's Economic Security Program, that's a great program because at the end of it, you will have a certification in something. For example, Burlington has the Skilled Trades Program, and they have a carpentry program out there. And the women who are leaving that program end with pre-apprenticeship skills in carpentry. And that program also makes sure that these women either get jobs or go on to the next step, which is to going on that journey for full carpentry and all that stuff, right? So there are programs out there. I want to ensure that we are here as a government to make sure that we're providing the supports and resources. And for me, I guess because I've been so connected to this sector, if there's something that I should be doing, I want to hear about it. I want to know what we should be investing in. I take meetings. So I would love to sit down with anybody who has good supports and resources and ways that we can help make lives better and safer for women in Ontario. All right. Thank you so much. I'm being the clap off the stage, but I have to end with this. When women succeed, Ontario succeeds. That's why we have to invest in women. All right? Thank you. All right. So I guess I'm done, unless anybody has any questions. So much for listening to me. And again, if you ever need to get a hold of me, Samantha's at the back there. She's my stakeholders person. And I have Jay as well here. He is my social media person. But please reach out. I'd love to talk. Thank you.
Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Also follow us on social media. And for more information, check out our website.